Eric had never really believed in fate. But there was something about Amir that he couldn't ignore. They were neighbors, their houses stood side by side, separated only by a waist-high wooden fence. The small coastal town they lived in was quiet. The kind of place where the sound of waves crashing against the shore was often the only thing breaking the silence of the night. That night, as a cool summer breeze rolled in from the ocean, Eric leaned against the fence, absent-mindedly twirling a dry leaf between his fingers. His gaze locked on Amir. Curiosity got the best of him. "You always look up at the sky like that," Eric said. "What are you looking for?" Amir turned his head slightly, his sharp eyes meeting Eric's. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then, with a small shrug, he finally spoke. "Not looking, just thinking." "Thinking about what?" A flicker of a smile crossed Amir's lips, so brief that Eric almost missed it. "Things you probably wouldn't understand." The next evening, Amir wasn't looking at the stars. Instead, he was sitting on the porch steps, absent-mindedly flipping a silver lighter between his fingers. The flame flickered to life for a second before he snapped it shut again. "You smoke?" Eric asked, nodding toward the lighter. Amir glanced at him, smirking slightly. "No, just a habit." Eric hesitated before stepping closer. "A nervous habit?" Amir chuckled, shaking his head. "More like a reminder." "A reminder of what?" "Of things I'd rather not forget." Eric studied Amir's face in the dim porch light. He had seen that look before, in himself, in his fellow firefighters. It was the look of someone carrying ghosts. He wanted to ask more, but he knew pushing too hard would only make Amir retreat. Instead, he changed the subject. "So, do you always sit out here alone?" Amir's lips twitched into something resembling amusement. "And what if I do? Then I'd say you could use some company." Amir tilted his head, considering Eric for a moment before finally gesturing toward the steps. "Suit yourself." For a while, they sat in silence. Eric felt an odd sense of comfort in Amir's quiet presence. Eventually, Amir broke the silence. "Why are you a firefighter?" The question caught Eric off guard. Most people asked about the danger, the adrenaline rush, the thrill, but Amir's tone wasn't like that. He sounded like he was trying to understand something deeper. Eric exhaled. "Because I wanted to help people." Amir nodded slowly. "And does it help?" "Most of the time," Eric admitted, "but not always." Another silence settled between them, this one heavier. "You?" Eric asked. "Why did you become a doctor?" Amir's fingers tightened around the lighter for just a second before he flicked it open again. The flame danced in the darkness, casting flickering shadows on his face. "Because sometimes, saving people is the only way to save yourself." Eric didn't know what to say to that. So, he just sat there, watching the flame glow between Amir's fingers, knowing that whatever ghosts he carried, Eric wanted to understand them. One evening, after a particularly exhausting shift at the fire station, Eric arrived at Amir's house without thinking. His uniform was damp with sweat, his body aching from the day's rescues. But the pull toward Amir was stronger than his exhaustion. Amir was already outside, a book resting on his lap. He glanced up, eyebrows raising slightly at Eric's disheveled state. "Rough day?" Amir asked, setting the book aside. "You could say that." Eric sighed, dropping onto the steps beside him. He ran a hand through his damp hair. "Pulled a kid out of a wreck today. He was lucky." Amir nodded, his expression unreadable. "And you?" Eric turned to him, confused. "What about me? You okay?" The question caught Eric off guard. People always asked about the victims, about the job, about the danger, but rarely about him. He searched Amir's face, trying to figure out why it mattered to him. "I'm fine," Eric said, though the weight in his chest said otherwise. Amir didn't push. Instead, he reached into the cooler by his feet and pulled out a cold beer. Handing it to Eric. "Drink?" Eric took it with a grateful nod. "You always this prepared?" Amir smirked. "You're not the only one who has long days. You ever get tired of being a doctor?" Amir took a sip of his own drink before answering. "No, but I do get tired of losing people." Eric understood that all too well. "Do you ever think about leaving?" Eric asked. Amir exhaled. "I used to. But..." Amir turned toward him, their eyes meeting in the dim light. "Some things are worth staying for." Eric wasn't sure if Amir was talking about his work, or something else entirely. But for the first time since meeting him, Eric felt the air between them shift. Not just curiosity, not just friendship, something more. Neither of them said anything about it. But as Eric sat there, feeling the warmth of Amir's presence beside him, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't just coming here to talk anymore. The town festival arrived with the scent of salt air and fried food drifting through the streets. Eric spotted Amir near the food stalls, talking to an older woman who worked at the clinic. He looked different tonight, more relaxed. His usual guarded expression softened. He wore a fitted navy button-down, sleeves rolled to his elbows. And Eric had to remind himself to breathe. "Didn't take you for a festival guy," Eric said, stepping beside him. Amir smirked. "Didn't take you for one either." "Touché." The older woman bid Amir goodbye with a knowing smile before walking away, leaving the two of them alone in the crowd. "You been coming to this every year?" Eric asked. "Most of them," Amir admitted. "It's nice to be around people without thinking about saving them." Eric nodded. He knew that feeling. The weight of always being needed. Of always being the one who had to be strong. A sudden burst of laughter pulled their attention toward the bonfire at the center of the square. Flames licked the air as people gathered around, their faces glowing in the light. "You wanna go?" Amir asked. Eric hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. They made their way toward the fire, where a group had formed for a storytelling game, a tradition of the festival. People shared stories of the town, of love and loss, of ghosts that supposedly haunted the lighthouse. "Got a story, fireman?" someone called out, nudging Eric. He shook his head with a chuckle. "Not one I'd tell in public." The group laughed, but Amir, standing beside him, gave him a curious glance. The game continued, but Eric barely heard the stories. He was too aware of Amir standing close, of the way the fire's glow made his eyes shine, of the occasional brush of their arms. It wasn't much. It wasn't intentional, but it was enough. As the night stretched on, the crowd slowly thinned. Eric and Amir lingered by the fire, neither in a rush to leave. The heat of the flames mixed with the cool breeze rolling in from the ocean, creating something almost intoxicating. "You seemed happy tonight," Eric said, breaking the silence. Amir exhaled, his gaze fixed on the flickering embers. "I think I forgot how to be." The words were quiet, almost lost to the crackle of the fire. But Eric heard them. "You still can," Eric said. He wasn't sure why he said it, maybe because he wanted it to be true. Amir turned to him then. And for a moment, Eric swore he saw something break through the walls Amir had so carefully built. But just as quickly, Amir looked away. "We should go," he said. "Yeah," Eric agreed, though part of him didn't want to. They walked in silence back through the festival, the music now a distant hum. When they reached Amir's house, Eric hesitated at the bottom of the steps. "Good night, Eric," Amir said, his voice softer than usual. Eric nodded, stepping back. "Good night." He turned to leave, but as he did, Amir's voice stopped him. "Thanks for tonight." Eric looked back, catching the briefest glimpse of vulnerability in Amir's expression. And in that moment, Eric knew, this wasn't just a passing connection. This was something real, something worth holding onto. The days after the festival felt different, though neither Eric nor Amir spoke about it. Something had shifted between them, subtle, unspoken, but undeniably there. At the fire station, Eric found himself distracted, his thoughts drifting back to that night by the bonfire, to the way Amir had looked at him, to the quiet admission of forgetting how to be happy. "You good, man?" Mason, one of the senior firefighters, nudged him as they checked the equipment on the truck. "Yeah," Eric replied, too quickly. Mason raised an eyebrow. "You sure? You've been zoning out all morning." Eric huffed a laugh, shaking his head. "Just tired." Mason didn't press, but Eric could tell he wasn't convinced. Maybe because Eric wasn't convinced either. That evening, as if pulled by an invisible thread, Eric found himself outside Amir's clinic. The lights inside were still on, casting a warm glow onto the quiet street. He hesitated, debating whether to turn back. But before he could, the door swung open. Amir froze in the doorway, clearly surprised to see him. "Eric? Hey." Eric stuffed his hands in his pockets. "I was just, walking by." Amir gave him a knowing look. "You don't just walk by, this late." Eric sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Okay, maybe not, but I figured you were still here. And I wanted to check in." Amir leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Check in? You seemed off the other night. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." Amir studied him for a moment before stepping aside. Come in. Inside. The clinic felt different at night, quieter. More intimate. The usual scent of antiseptic was softened by the faint aroma of coffee. Papers were scattered across the desk, along with Amir's reading glasses, which Eric had never seen him wear before. You work late a lot? Eric asked, nodding toward the mess. Amir sighed, rubbing his temple. More than I should. Small-town clinic means I'm basically always on call. Eric frowned. That can't be healthy. A smirk tugged at Amir's lips. Says the firefighter who runs into burning buildings. Touché, Eric admitted. They fell into a comfortable silence. The tension from their last meeting not quite gone but lighter now. Eric glanced at the papers, noting patient charts and medical reports. His gaze drifted to a framed photo on the desk, a younger Amir in uniform, standing beside another man, both grinning. Eric pointed at it. Who's that? Amir's expression changed, the smile slipping. That's Daniel, my husband. The words hit Eric like a sudden gust of wind. He hadn't expected that. Hadn't expected the quiet ache in Amir's voice either. Eric hesitated, then asked softly, what happened? For a long moment, Amir didn't answer. Then, with a deep breath, he said, he was a medic, deployed overseas. He didn't make it back. Regret flashed across Amir's face. Like he hadn't meant to say it aloud. Like he had let Eric see too much. Eric swallowed the lump in his throat. I'm sorry. Amir gave a small, tight nod. It was a long time ago. But Eric could tell, it still hurt. Maybe it always would. Do you? Eric started. Then hesitated. Do you still think about him a lot? A ghost of a smile crossed Amir's lips. Every day. Eric nodded, not knowing what to say. He wasn't sure why this moment felt so heavy. So important. Maybe because he understood grief. Maybe because, for the first time, Amir was letting him see past the walls. And Eric wasn't about to walk away. Instead, he pulled out a chair and sat across from Amir, silent but present, letting him know he wasn't alone. And for once, Amir didn't push him away. The weeks that followed were filled with an unspoken understanding between Eric and Amir. They never directly addressed the conversation in the clinic. But something had changed. Their interactions carried a weight neither of them acknowledged. Yet neither of them avoided. Late-night coffee runs became a habit. Eric would swing by Amir's clinic after a shift, sometimes bringing takeout, sometimes just his presence. Amir never asked him to leave. But Eric knew there were lines still drawn between them. One evening, a call came in, a house fire on the outskirts of town. Eric and his team were first on the scene. Flames already tearing through the old structure. The owner, an elderly man, was trapped inside. Eric, wait for backup, Mason yelled as Eric secured his gear. But Eric was already moving. The heat was suffocating, smoke thick in the air as Eric forced his way through the collapsing hallway. He found the man unconscious near the living room, hoisted him over his shoulder, and pushed forward. A sudden crash, wood splintering, fire roaring higher. The ceiling groaned above him. He wasn't going to make it. And then, a hand yanked him backward. Another firefighter, Mason. Together, they hauled the man out just as part of the roof caved in behind them. Eric collapsed onto the grass outside, lungs burning. The paramedics rushed in, taking the elderly man away. Jesus, Eric, Mason panted, pulling off his helmet. You keep doing shit like that. And one day, you won't be so lucky. But Eric barely heard him. His gaze had landed on Amir, standing just beyond the ambulance. His face pale, eyes locked onto him. Amir had seen everything. Later that night, long after the fire had been put out, Eric found himself outside Amir's place. He wasn't sure why he was there, just that he needed to be. Amir opened the door before Eric could knock. You're an idiot, Amir said, his voice tight with something Eric couldn't quite place. Eric smirked. Good to see you too. Don't, Amir snapped, stepping closer. I saw you go in there. Eric, I saw how close you came to. He stopped, exhaling sharply. Eric's smirk faded. It's my job. I know. Amir's hands clenched at his sides. But watching you almost die, he cut himself off. Looking away, Eric stared at him, heartbeat loud in his ears. You care, Eric said quietly. It wasn't a question. Amir didn't look at him. But he didn't deny it either. For a moment, the night stretched between them, heavy with things left unsaid. Then, with a sigh, Amir stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come inside." Eric did. Eric leaned against the counter, watching him. "You gonna yell at me some more? Or are we past that part?" Amir's glare was sharp, but there was something else in his eyes, something Eric couldn't quite pin down. "I don't make a habit of wasting my breath on people who don't listen." Eric let out a short laugh. "Fair enough." Silence stretched between them. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was charged. Eric could still see the worry on Amir's face from earlier. Could still feel the weight of the moment when their eyes met at the fire scene. "I wasn't trying to be reckless," Eric finally said. "That man would have died if I hadn't gone in." Amir ran a hand through his hair. "And what if you had died?" "Eric, then what?" Eric had no good answer to that. Because the truth was, he hadn't thought about it. He never did. Amir sighed, shaking his head. "You think you're invincible. You throw yourself into danger like you don't." He stopped, taking a sharp breath. "Like you don't care what happens to you." Eric frowned. "That's not true." "Then prove it." Something in Amir's voice made Eric's chest tighten. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Amir turned away, heading to the kitchen. "You want coffee?" Eric hesitated. "Sure." The conversation wasn't over, but for now, they let it settle. At one point, Amir leaned against the counter across from Eric, his fingers tapping idly against his mug. "I meant what I said," he murmured. Eric raised a brow. "You've said a lot of things tonight." Amir rolled his eyes but didn't take the bait. "About watching you run into that fire." His voice was quieter now. "I haven't felt like that in a long time. Like I was about to lose something." He cut himself off, shaking his head. Eric's pulse kicked up. "Something you what?" Amir looked at him then, and Eric felt pinned in place. "Something I don't want to lose," Amir admitted, voice barely above a whisper. The words settled deep in Eric's chest, making something stir, something dangerous, something real. He swallowed hard, setting his mug down. But Amir shook his head. "I don't know what this is, Eric, and I don't know if I'm ready for it." Eric understood. He really did, but he also knew that whatever was between them, it wasn't going away. So instead of pushing, he simply nodded. "Okay, for now." That was enough. The next few days passed in a strange, unspoken truce. At the firehouse, Eric found himself distracted, something that never happened to him. Normally, the job was the only thing that could clear his mind, the rush of adrenaline blocking out everything else. But now, even as he went through drills and responded to calls, his thoughts drifted back to Amir's words. "Something I don't want to lose." Those words had replayed in his head more times than he cared to admit. "You good, man?" Liam asked as they sat in the break room between shifts. Eric blinked, realizing he'd been staring at the wall. "Yeah, just tired." Liam smirked. "Tired? Or thinking about that hot doctor who keeps giving you heart attacks?" Eric shot him a glare. "Shut up." Liam laughed, leaning back in his chair. "Dude, everyone sees it. You and Amir have something. And don't give me that, just friends, crap." Eric sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "It's complicated." Liam raised a brow. "Because you're making it complicated." Maybe he was. That night, Eric found himself at Amir's apartment again. It had become their routine, one that neither of them acknowledged but both kept falling into. Amir opened the door, eyes flickering with something unreadable before he stepped aside to let Eric in. You could call before just showing up." Eric smirked. "Would you have answered?" Amir hesitated. "Probably not." Eric chuckled, toeing off his boots. "Exactly. I don't know what to do with you," Amir admitted after a long silence. Eric tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Amir exhaled sharply, setting his mug down. "I've spent so much time trying to keep myself in control, to keep my life in order. And then you come crashing in like a damn wildfire. And suddenly nothing makes sense anymore." Eric's chest tightened. He set his own mug down and took a cautious step closer. "Amir, do you even realize what it's like?" Amir cut him off, his voice low but intense. "Watching you throw yourself into danger over and over again? Not knowing if this is the time you don't make it back?" Eric didn't have an answer to that. Because the truth was, he'd never thought about what it meant for someone else to worry about him like that. Amir shook his head, frustration clear in his expression. "I can't do this if you don't care whether you make it out alive." Without thinking, he reached out, his fingers curling around Amir's wrist. The contact sent a jolt through him, grounding and electric all at once. Amir tensed but didn't pull away. I'm not invincible, Eric said quietly. And I don't want to be reckless. But this job, it's a part of me. Just like medicine is a part of you. Amir's eyes searched his. The frustration still there but now laced with something else. Something softer. After a long pause, Amir sighed. I hate that you make sense sometimes. Eric smirked. Only sometimes? Amir rolled his eyes but didn't pull away. Eric took that as a win. The sirens had barely faded when Eric stumbled out of the fire truck. Exhaustion weighing on him. The warehouse fire had been brutal. But everyone had made it out alive. That should have been enough. But his mind wasn't on the fire. It was on Amir. He found himself at Amir's apartment without thinking. His knuckles rapping against the door. When it opened, Amir stood there, his face shifting from surprise to relief in an instant. You're okay, Amir breathed, reaching out before stopping himself. Eric let out a tired chuckle. Yeah, I am. Amir exhaled, tension melting from his shoulders. Good. For a moment, they just stood there. Then, Eric took a step closer, closing the space between them. I don't want to keep running from this, Eric admitted. From you. Amir's eyes softened. Neither do I. The hesitation, the doubts, none of it mattered anymore. Eric reached for Amir, and this time, Amir met him halfway. The kiss was slow, deep, filled with unspoken promises. When they finally pulled apart, Amir smiled. Stay? Eric nodded. Yeah, I think I will. Outside, the stars shone bright over the town, the same way they always had. But for Eric and Amir, everything had changed, and for the first time in a long time, that change felt like home.